Yes. My picture.
Closer in.
Are we ready? Good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm Rania Mancario, CEO of Crime Stoppers of Houston, and I'm joined this morning by Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, State Senator John Whitmire, Chair of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee and author of Senate Bill 402, members of Parents of Murdered Children, and Barbara Verapin and Larissa Singh, who will be speaking in a few moments. We're gathered today to discuss Senate Bill 402, legislation filed by Senator John Whitmire, and that will help speed up the setting of murder trials. In a moment, you will hear from Senator Whitmire as well as Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, supporters of this proposed legislation. For over 42 years, Crime Stoppers of Houston has served the greater Houston area not only by offering an anonymous tip line, a valuable reporting platform that has proven to be extremely helpful in both solving serious crime and in locating dangerous defendants and fugitives, but also by standing with crime victims and their surviving families, acting as an advocate on all stages of victimization. The mission of Crime Stoppers of Houston's Victim Services and Advocacy Program, led by Andy Kahn, is therefore to promote safety, healing, justice, and rights for crime victims and survivors. Year after year, we have stood with victim families to help ensure that they have a voice in our criminal justice system, and we have worked with all willing community members and leaders to advocate for legislative improvements to enhance victim rights and public safety. With that being said, Crime Stoppers supports Senate Bill 402 for many reasons. First being, it addresses the backlog. The backlog has resulted in delayed justice for surviving family members of homicide and threatens to deny constitutional rights to a speedy trial for the accused. This must change, and this addresses it. It also raises a very important issue around concerns with public safety when defendants charged with murder remain out on bond while waiting years for their day in court. Additionally, it brings accountability and strategy to the courthouse. Accountability in requiring certain cases to move forward, and a strategy to prioritize cases in which defendants are charged with serious crimes like murder. Crime Stoppers of Houston is proud to stand with Senator Whitmire and Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg on this important legislation. And I urge, as a community member, a citizen of this wonderful city and county, we urge every single person to pay attention to what's happening this legislative session and to get engaged in any way you are able. With that, I now ask DA Kim Ogg to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. Do we have somebody working the screens? Okay, terrific. I'll let you know when we need the slides. Good morning. I'm Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg. I'm joined today by crime victims and survivors, as well as many other concerned citizens and members of the public who support real solutions to the alarming number of people being murdered in Harris County and the greater Houston area. We're here together in support of Senator John Whitmire's new legislation to prioritize our court's scheduling of capital murder and murder trials so that offenders who pose the greatest threat to our community and to your safety will be brought to trial faster, reducing the chances of them re-victimizing new victims. Senate Bill 402 will also help crime victims and their survivors reach finality in their cases faster. They're on an unwanted journey through the criminal justice system, which the faster it comes to finality, the better, presuming that all is done properly in the preparation of the case. Surviving family members of murder victims Larissa Singh and Barbara Virapin are here today, and they'll tell you from a victim's perspective why this legislation is so important. Senate Bill 402 will also aid prosecutors in getting our most important cases to trial, and it will improve the success in those cases. I need and want to show the public the data that's driving our support of Senator John Whitmire's legislation. Slide 1. The Harris County multi-agency combined homicide rate, that's the City of Houston HPD, that's the Sheriff's Department and all the constables, that's Pasadena PD and Baytown PD. Their combined homicide rate over the past 30 years reveals that homicides in 2021 and 2022 have been at an all-time high in the last 30 years. Slide 2. With regard to the Sheriff's Department and constables, 2022 was the single deadliest year for victims in Harris County in 30 years. Slide 3. For HPD, while yes, there were fewer homicides, thank goodness, in 2022 than there were in 2021, more people were murdered in those 2 years than in any other year since 1994. And that was during Houston's last ultra-violent crime wave. In just the first 20 days of this year, the 4 major agencies have reported 23 murders. That's more than one person in the greater Houston area that is Harris County per day. So how does that impact our justice system? Slide 4 shows you that in 2017, our DA's office filed 250 capital murders or murder cases. Compare that to last year when we filed 505 cases, showing more people are engaging in ultra-violent crime than ever before. Remember, our system is an assembly line, so what happens on the street to these families then happens to the police department, then happens to the DA's office, then happens to the courts. It's an assembly line, and it goes back to the community. When the courts are clogged and the trials are delayed, crime increases in the community, and regular people suffer. And how does that impact the case backlog? On slide 5, you'll see that murder cases compared January 1 of 2017 and each year until January 1 of this year show that 1,841 capital murder cases are currently pending. It was 1,836 on January 1. And they're pending against just about as many offenders. 885 individuals charged with murder or capital murder are in our Harris County Jail. 927 are on bond or are fugitives at large. These are our highest risk offenders. To the families, to you, to the policemen who may pull them over on traffic or be after them for a new homicide, and to the average Houstonian. That's why Senate Bill 4 makes so much sense. One last item and reason that we need this legislation. We see what's happening in our courts. We want you to see what's happening in our courts. There were 263 cases tried to verdict last year. Of those, 54 were capital murders or murders, but 54 trials when there are 1,841 of these cases pending just won't get us there. Our courts need directive. That's what this legislation does, and it brings these cases to the priority level that the public knows they are, our top priority. My commitment as your district attorney is to treat these cases with exactly the priority they deserve, and that's why last year we created a 16-member homicide squad. They are our A team. They are led by Sarah Seeley. She's here today. I'd be happy to introduce her at the conclusion of this press conference. And she leads a team of professional prosecutors who are dedicated exclusively to trying capital murders and murder cases. And they're making great progress. But this legislation, Senator, there you are, this legislation jumpstarts our solution in Harris County. Thank you on behalf of all of us for filing this. We know that when we need leadership, we can count on you. Senator?
Thank you, District Attorney Ogg. There's no greater responsibility that government has than public safety. And it's not just idle words when you talk about public safety. Criminal justice is a system. I've said this repeatedly for a number of years. It's a very detailed, starts with patrolmen on the street, all the way through prosecution, court, and ultimately accountability. We have broken components in our criminal justice system in Harris County. Our officers are working overtime. The district attorney staff is overworked. The problem in our criminal justice system is we're not processing the cases that are assigned to court. In introducing this legislation, we're sending a strong, not message, but an instruction to our 23 criminal district courts to make murder and capital murder cases your priority. Other matters in your court are important, and there are other listed offenses that are priorities listed by the legislature. But surely everyone can agree, all the stakeholders, and certainly the people that we represent, certainly the public understands that murder and capital murders are the most important cases. We cannot continue to live in a community, and with the numbers that the district attorney just enumerated, and let me repeat them and let it be reported. And I carried this card last week to my colleagues in the Senate. It speaks for itself. 1,841 backlogged murder and capital murder cases waiting to be heard in the court. The district attorney enumerated the impact that has on our society, the crime victims' families, our law enforcement, just those of us that want to live in a peaceful community. Out of the 1,841, there's only 885 of those individuals in jail. Let me digress for a moment. Our jail is not designed for long-term confinement. Jails are in and out to process people. We have prisons for people that need to be confined 4, 5, or more years. So that's creating a broken jail system that's unsafe for our correction officers and the confinees. We have 500 people from Harris County serving time in Louisiana jail, in Post, Texas, when they belong in their community so they can talk to their attorney and their family. So that's a broken element caused by the backlog of murder and capital murder cases. But here's the outrageous part that ought to frighten everyone that can hear my voice. 956 people charged with murder and capital murder. The worst of the worst, the most violent, the repeat violent offenders are on the streets of Houston. I am totally convinced that that set of folks are the ones that's wreaking havoc and frightening Houstonians. I have seniors that come to me in the Heights and say, Senator, you've got to do something. We're afraid to leave the home after 5 o'clock. We don't have to live like this. The random murders that the crime victims' families have had to suffer through, we cannot continue down this path with 956 people out of jails. And here's even a worse part. 631 are fugitives. No one knows where they are this morning. And these folks do not commit a violent offense, a robbery, a random shooting one time. They're repeat offenders. They're getting up this morning to see who will be their victims this evening. And another alarming thing that's not part of our discussion today are the crimes that we don't even capture a suspect. The robbery at the dollar store the other day, shoot a worker. Suspects get away. We get them on videotape, and they're never brought to court and held accountable. So, Senate Bill 402 is very plain spoken, not complicated at all. It makes murder and capital murder, it adds them to the penal code violations for which trial courts give preference to hearings and trials. It is a game changer. Everyone involved at the courthouse ought to join hands with us to pursue this, pass it. I am very confident that it'll pass the Senate. We have an outstanding House sponsor in Sam Harless, and it will be my job daily to see that this legislation becomes law, and I do believe that it will be a major change, and I just hope the people of Houston know that help's on the way, but this is a no-nonsense piece of legislation that'll take the worst of the worst and take them to court. Here's something that we all know. It's been written about and studied for years. Swift and certain punishment is the best deterrent for violent offenders. When they know that they can get a bond, in my career of fighting crime, it is unheard of that a capital murder defendant would be out on bond and released. They're the highest risk when our law enforcement seeks to arrest them. They know if they're convicted of that capital murder, and some have been to confinement before, they know if they're arrested and convicted, they will serve life without parole or death. And of course, they don't want to be apprehended by law enforcement. So our law enforcement are begging us for this kind of certain legislation that'll help their job be safer. So with that, thank you for Crime Stoppers, our district attorney, and certainly the crime victims once again are coming forward to help us make this a safer community.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Verpin. I'm here on behalf of the crime victims. This morning I want to thank Senator Whitman on the bill 402. I would like my respect to all in the audience, Kim Ogg, Andy Kahn, most of all, Crime Stoppers. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My son was murdered in 2009, and I'm not going to be long, but just wanted to say it took me 5 years to go to trial. We would go to court every month, and it would be reset. So my family, even to today, it looks like it was yesterday this happened. Even to today, everyone is devastated about this. I did have a lot of support, and members of the victims, please don't give up. You will have that support too. You will. There is a lot to go, but again, like I said, for this bill, from what I'm hearing now, thank you very much, Senator, for putting that together. I think it's really going to help the victims, and it's going to do, justice. Kim, thank you very much for everything. Crime Stoppers, thank you. Andy, you're a big part in this. Thank you very much. We had the support from everyone. The thing is, with with the 5 years, what I went through, I really don't want any one of my brothers and sisters in the audience to go through this. We had a hard time. It's not a day, even to now, like Senator said, 5 o'clock, you don't want to go to the store. I don't even get out of my house to go to the store without my husband because I'm afraid. You don't know who is in the back of you, who is in the front, who is in the side, where they are. So I urge everyone, please, support Crime Stoppers, support this bill, and we will have justice for everyone one day. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Larissa Sang. I just wanted to thank the Senator for all the work that he's done, District Attorney Ogg and her team. I wasn't really sure what to come up here and say. This is not really my realm. I'm not really, this is not my thing, but it's important. And I want to start off by telling you a little bit about my sister. My sister's name was Karen Sankeet. She was murdered on September 17, 2017. No, not 2000, September 17, 2013. Her trial didn't come until July 2017. That was 4 years that we had to wait. 4 years that her murderer was allowed to run free, was allowed to live her life, was allowed to spend time with her family, her friends, when we weren't. One thing that I think I don't know if everybody forgets this, but it feels like for our family, behind that case file, behind that case number is a person. It's a person's life. It's a person who was loved by someone. It's a person who was cherished by someone. It was a person who, regardless of whether or not, they had a big family or anything else, everybody in the world has one person that loves them. And for me and for our family, that was my sister. I understand, we all understand as families of victims that we have to let everything run through the process, but you don't realize how long it takes. And I think for me, my thing was like I used to watch Dateline, all that kind of stuff, and then I used to think, oh, well, why are they doing a follow-up after like a year? They do the stories with the families, with the investigators and all of those things, and then they come back a year later, and then you see, oh. And when we were going through this problem, like, that's why, because it takes that long. Not everything is wrapped up in an hour. Not everything is wrapped up like you see on TV and everything else, and you won't understand that unless you've gone through it. And it's a lot of patience on families, to try to wait and see what's going on with the case. It's a lot of follow-up with the, ADA's office. And for my sister's case, it switched courts 3 times. So that's 3 times that you have to retell your story to a different ADA, to a different court, took 2 years for it to get to the grand jury and another 2 years to get to trial. And for me, the hardest part for myself and for my family was just the wait. You wait, and there's nothing else that you can do but wait. And if this bill does what it says it's supposed to, I'm glad that I could be just a little part of it by speaking to everybody. And I do thank everybody else that's here and everybody that will listen, because, like I said, behind that file, behind that number is a person. And that's what we need to remember. They're not here to speak for themselves. They're the only people that are here to speak for them are the ones that love them, and people like, the ADA's office that work so hard. They have lives too. We know that. We understood that. And I'm looking at Chris, because Chris actually tried my sister's murderer's case. And, you're empathetic towards that. But also, you have like this hole in your life and in your heart that can never be fulfilled because that person is gone. So I think I went over my 5. So I'm just going to go ahead and thank everybody again. I really do hope that, everybody just kind of remember that it's a person, somebody that loved them. Thank you.
Buenos días. Me llamo Rubén Pérez. Soy fiscal del condado de Harris. Trabajo por la fiscalería de Kim Ogg, la fiscal del condado de Harris. Soy el director, el jefe de la división de los crímenes especiales. Kim Ogg anuncia su apoyo a la legislación propuesta para eliminar los retrasos de los juicios por asesinato. Kim Ogg se une con el senador John Whitmire, autor del SB 402. SB 402 es necesario que los jueces escuchen casos de asesino y asesinato capital para juicio antes de otros casos. Esta legislación pone los asesinatos y los asesinatos capitales a la par con los delitos sexuales contra niños y los casos de violencia doméstica, que la ley hoy requiere que los jueces oigan estos casos antes de otros casos. Las largas demoras en estos casos pueden resultar en la pérdida de testigos de pruebas. Cuando estos casos se delitan y duran mucho para ir a juicio, muchas veces los testigos se pierden y las pruebas se pierden y es el resultado y no es bueno para el caso de nosotros. Mientras tanto, los delincuentes violentos que esperan juicio bajo fianza ponen en peligro la seguridad pública mientras esperan años para su día en la corte. Eso no es justo, que un acusado esté en las calles del condado de Harris, libres, como dijo la señorita, y las víctimas estén sufriendo día tras día esperando justicia. El proyecto de la ley es para obtener justicia más rápida para las familias en todo Texas, no nomás el condado de Harris, pero todo Texas. Todos estamos de acuerdo que las familias de las víctimas no deberían tener que sufrir largas esperas antes de que se lleven a cabo los juicios. No es justo para que las familias estén esperando juicio. La fiscal Kim Ogg, el senador John Whitmire, Crime Stoppers, las víctimas de crimen y otros trabajaremos juntos para aprobar SB 402 en esta sección dictable. Muchas gracias a mi jefa, Kim Ogg, senador John Whitmire, Crime Stoppers, a todos los que están aquí apoyando en este esfuerzo para hacer esta ley que sea ley. Muchas gracias, que Dios los bendiga y que Dios bendiga a América. Gracias.
Thank you, Ruben. And I want to also recognize that our chairman, Lindsay Aaronstein, is with us. I'd like to ask at this time if you are a victim, family, or surviving member, will you please come up and stand with us? Would you please just take a moment and come up and stand with us? And if you guys can come in a little bit. Just want to reiterate that this work matters, and these people matter, and their loved ones mattered, and the next victim matters, and this is unconscionable. At this time, we'll open it up for any questions. How many are currently waiting trial?
Good question.
And I want to thank you, Senator Whitmire, for this legislation. We'll open it up to any other questions.
I noticed that it doesn't say what is an acceptable time to have a trial happen. It's kind of a little vague. What is an adequate amount of time for everything to go to trial?
Well, obviously, you have to be ready for trial. There's a Speedy Trial Act that requires it, but the problem is you're having trials on other matters, important. The real problem is the slowness and the lack of urgency of any trials being held, would be from my perspective. So one, it's 10:30 this morning. It'd be interesting how many of our courtrooms are actively in trial this morning. Certainly it'd be interesting to look this afternoon. But we want everybody to go forward with this piece of legislation and make murders and capital murders their priority. So if they are preparing for trial, the district attorney's doing everything she can, law enforcement's participating. The problem is the backlog is not being addressed in a meaningful way with multiple offenses. But if you're going to have a trial, what my intent is, put the murder and the capital murder cases first. You've heard these heart-wrenching stories. The courthouse was not designed for murder cases to not be taken to court for 4 and 5 years. I've already addressed what it does to the jail system. It's what it does to everyone involved, but particularly the crime victims' families. It's just wrong, evidence gets cold, witnesses get lost. It's just not justice. And quite frankly, for those that would be found innocent, it's not fair to defendants that have their story to tell. So I can't imagine any pushback. I've been surprised before, but this is a piece of legislation that will improve the criminal justice system for everyone on both sides of the courtroom. So it's a no-nonsense piece of legislation. It addresses these concerns. The public's asking for it. Public doesn't understand when they just see reset. Here's a problem since Harvey was, you know, the facilities, COVID. We cannot continue to use excuses for not having a criminal justice system that works efficiently in Harris County. I mentioned a while ago, and the studies will show, the professional violent offenders, and many of these fugitives would certainly fall in that category. The only thing that's going to get your attention is swift and certain punishment. I was robbed at gunpoint in '92. The perpetrator went to court and was given a 25-year sentence for putting a gun in my family's face. He was not able to conduct his business. There are people that is their profession. They don't do it one time and say, oh, we made a good haul and that's it. Not only that, they don't shoot people one time. They have no conscience because, one, they know they're not being held accountable, and two, they know from their friends and discussions they're likely to get bond and be on the streets of Houston 4 and 5 years. And sometimes they just think, oh, you know, that's just eventually getting caught the price of our work. They are professional criminals, and the public understands that. So now we're passing legislation to say take them to the front of the line, hold them accountable, and we'll have a safer city in Harris County.
Do you believe that the emergency relief dockets utilization associate judges the implementation of a new district court? Is that not enough? I mean, the backlog has decreased since the height of the pandemic.
Could you submit your questions in writing, Ms. Hensley?
Here's my card. Numbers are what they are. This morning, with all the discussion, 1,841 people are backlogged and they're charged with murder and capital murder. That's the end of the discussion. We want them to be processed, and we want them to go to the front of the line.
Good morning, Senator. Good morning, Kim. Real fast, Kim. When you look at this situation and at the big picture, and while you're implementing legislation to help get the process going, I understand that. Is there an additional aspect of this that really isn't being examined truthfully in the fact that we are a city that has grown dramatically in the last few
Sure.
years? We are currently showing growth that will average 100,000 plus for the next 8 years, which would put us again way over another million here. Kim, question to you here on this. Do we have enough courtrooms in Harris County? I know we do have the additional ones that we put in. And is part of the solution here getting more courtrooms in Harris County?
Not until you have the people to work in those courtrooms. So yes, courtrooms are needed. I think the Office of Court Administration statewide says Harris County need dozens of new courts. But I can tell you, without the police to investigate, without the labs to test, without sufficient personnel at the district attorney's office and in the courts, the clerks, the bailiffs, and people to watch the inmates, it's pretty tough to add new courts. You've got to really support the whole infrastructure. We're a body that depends on each limb to be whole, and we're all understaffed. But this will at least allow us, we've committed the resources at the DA's office to address capital murder and murder, not in a case where we're being forced to trial when someone knows or court knows we're not ready, but we have a number of cases that are ready and we'd like to see them tried on a priority basis. That's why I created a homicide squad and dedicated 16 people of our top people to it. Senators just making it the law that just like child abuse and domestic violence are supposed to be prioritized, so should murder and capital murder. I want to thank you again, Senator.
CEO, how would this impact possible delays in forensic testing, DNA
I'm going to ask you to submit that question in writing so that we can answer it accurately for you. Any other questions?
Yeah, onto this Senate bill, a high-profile capital murder case here in the city of Houston that obviously everyone's heard about, Harding Street, perfect example. How would this accelerate a case like Harding Street where still 4 years after that case, there is nothing in terms of any kind of conviction from the office?
So I am not in a position to be able to talk about pending cases, especially a case that is in process now. But what I can tell you is when the law says cases should be prioritized if they're sexual assaults of children, that's the law now. If they're domestic violence, that's the law now. We believe it just makes common sense to go after our highest risk offenders, murders and capital murders. And to have 1,841 pending is an all-time high. So we need solutions. This is a part of an overall solution. There's no silver bullets in this situation, and we've been here before. We've seen a violent crime wave in Harris County. That's why I asked for 30 years worth of statistics so that our public could really see the context of where we are. When you compare one year to the next year, it doesn't help you understand that they were all people whose lives were stolen. And we need to go get them justice and get those perpetrators off the street, or if they're not guilty, get their cases done so they can be liberated.
Senator, how do you hold those courtrooms accountable as you brought up? Where you're saying I'd be interested in seeing if there's activity going on. Coming off your point, how do you hold those courtrooms accountable?
Well, obviously, conferences such as this, talking, you're not going to solve a problem. It's been my experience in government until you admit you have a problem. The sad note is there are stakeholders in our city and county that spin it that we're doing better. We need urgency to this matter. The public knows that it's not safe. What the public probably didn't know until we give them the numbers today, that there's 956 people on the streets of Houston, Harris County charged with murder or capital murder. It's unheard of for a capital murder. That's the worst of the worst offender with the greatest consequences if you're convicted. Those individuals are in our society. So there's no question why when you go home in the evening and watch the evening news, Mario, that there are repeat violent offenders and often the same individual conducting it. That's what this legislation is attempting to address. Take the folks that have already been charged to court and make it a priority and get them off the streets of Houston, Harris County. Because I know from my experience, they are repeat offenders. They do not rob and steal and shoot you once and then stop. The random killings of Mr. Castro's tragedy, I mean, it's just unheard of to have to live in a society like it. We don't have to. We need to support law enforcement. We need to support the DA's office. We need to support the forensics. You know, some of the cases are delayed because the forensics are understaffed. So this is an outcry by those of us that stand before you today saying we can do better, we must do better, and we ask all of our other stakeholders, all the elected officials ought to make this an urgent matter and quit saying that 22 was better than 21. That is not a proper measurement. And I applaud the district attorney for giving us a 30-year overview of where we stand. And to address your growth, yeah, we got to get ready for the growth. But before we get ready for the growth, we better take care of today's problems because we're lacking. And this legislation will be supported, it'll be law, and make murders and capital murders a priority.
Just a closing comment. I'm Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services for Crime Stoppers of Houston. Also been on the board of Parents and Murdered Children and Surviving Family Members for over 30 years. Our chapter leader, Gilda Moskwinsky, is also here today, and you'll see some of the families that are part of an organization that's the only organization in this country in which someone else writes out your membership for you. One of the frequent complaints that Gilda and I hear regularly at monthly meetings is, how long do I have to wait? How long? And for some families, it's hard for us to answer that question because it's the weight. And we've seen cases in which witnesses have vanished, witnesses have died, family members have died, all for waiting. So legislation like this kind of brings it full circle. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for surviving family members of homicide, and it should be perceived as a win for defendants who also have to wait and languish years for trials as well. So we are, again, once we find out there's a hearing, we will let everybody know when there's a hearing. You can come up and support this legislation, and let's get this bill passed. It's incumbent upon public safety right now. We're in this crisis situation, and as both the senator and the district attorney, Kim Ogg, said, we got a problem, Houston. Let's realize we have a problem, and that's what this legislation does. There's no greater offense than the loss of a loved one in murder and capital murder, and they should be prioritized. And I think I'm speaking for everybody here, for families that are waiting for justice and for families that are also up here whose killer hasn't been caught yet. So we, again, thank you for your time. I want to thank all the families that took time out of their schedule to be here today, and we're hoping that we get a hearing soon, we get this bill passed, and again, thank you for everybody for whatever everybody does on behalf of public safety. Thank you.
Senator Whitmire was still behind me. Thank you for hosting us.
Oh, yes.
Good bill, huh? Gilda, good bill, huh?
I wanted to tell you, and I don't know what happened with the meeting, but I want to tell you Celeste did a good job to